and get started. I again appreciate you taking half an hour out of your afternoon to be here today. Um, Essentially, this is just a quick 30-minute commercial about CITL's AI Fluency Certificate, and so it will be recorded and available later. But I'm going to walk through, I guess before I jump in and tell you about the certificate, how to get started, I'm going to take just a minute to try to sell you on why it might be valuable to you. So the bell's still going off, lots of people still coming in. I will go back and say, my name's Jim Wentworth. I work at the Center for Innovation and Teaching and Learning, where I am the AI strategist now. We're trying to figure out how to use AI in all kinds of innovative ways. And this AI Fluency Certificate, we've just relaunched recently. So for a little bit of background, we started this as a pilot in the fall of last year. We had about 260 people who went through some of the modules. As I think 7 or 8 people actually completed the certificate in pilot mode, but we got a lot of feedback, and now we've relaunched the new certificate, and it's available across campus for anybody who wants it. So that's what I'll talk about mainly today. But first, let me take a quick minute to sell you on why. Why would you even care about this other than it's nice to have a certificate and learn a little bit more about AI? But yesterday, right, we're all busy. Um, and yesterday I'm realizing, well, I haven't put together anything for today's talk at 1, and I ought to have something at least. And so I jump over to ChatGPT, and this should look familiar. This is the PowerPoint we're looking at. But all it takes is a single prompt inside of what's called a project folder. This project folder I've been used, it's designed to help me generate content for the Fluency modules. So it has a very good idea of what's in those modules. So when I ask it simply, what should I put together for a 30-minute presentation? It gives me a pretty good structure. And because I'm busy, I really just jump straight to the point and say, I need a PowerPoint. Give me a PowerPoint file. And then I end up with this. Um, and so this is a single prompt now, right? It didn't take anything other than me asking, can you make this, generate a PowerPoint for me? And all of that, and the information is very accurate. So I'll use this to walk through and talk about the certificate a little bit. Because this is grounded in the contents of that project folder, I know that the information it's drawing from is mine. I know that it's fairly accurate, and it just saved me a huge amount of time in jump starting a PowerPoint that if I'd started from scratch, I probably would have had to take a couple hours to think about putting together. But it has the context. It knows what I want to say. And so that I see is one of the values of just starting to master these tools is there's so much time saving available. While we're here, I'm going to show you one other fun thing. Now, just here in Google Drive is where I've uploaded this PowerPoint. So we're just looking at this slideshow in Google Drive. They have now added this nice feature of convert to video. So I can take this entire presentation that was generated, with almost no effort and turn this into a video. I think I got to move my window out of the way, hit next. And I'm just going to take the defaults and let it do its thing. We'll take a look at that maybe here in a little bit. All right. Any questions before I get started? I'm going to turn off my camera and dive into the certificate, but any questions at all? All right. So this course, which you can get to, let me jump back here and start here. Um, So as I say, this was pretty much generated based on the content that it knows about the curriculum that we've been developing. Um, the original motivation for this certificate was really to help students upskill a little bit. We weren't offering much in the curriculum yet, and students were leaving campus without a whole lot of opportunity to upskill in AI. And so we put these out there and they did start getting some use, but a lot of the pilot folks that went through it were probably faculty and staff on campus. It's really aimed at a fairly broad fluency So we're not diving too much into specific tools. We do focus on the campus tools and we offer some walkthroughs of those tools, but trying to be kind of tool agnostic in this certificate. And these are the kinds of things that the modules are focusing on is kind of really understanding what AI is, how to use it as a good collaborator, how you can get very intentional with your design and start developing things like those project folders I'm using to generate content to get very predictable results, things like that. It talks a little bit about kind of how we move from the old mentality of searching to inquiry and how we start to shift our thinking a little bit about what we should expect these tools to do for us. I tend not to think of these tools as fact generating in any way, right? These are creative tools that are brainstorming and can help identify gaps, and there's all kinds of uses, but generating facts is not their strength. We go into prompting, of course. So overall, I'm fairly happy. I'm showing you this PowerPoint in part to see how good of a job it did in covering things. And I think overall, might not hit on the exact things I would have hit on, but it's a usable PowerPoint for me today. It does get into kind of the intentional design and how to use things like custom instructions and manage your memory settings to get much more beneficial results, and how things like custom agents or GPTs can be beneficial in certain circumstances. It was made generically, not just for faculty, kind of for anybody who wants to dive in and learn AI, but certainly there's a faculty focus. A lot of the activities might be a little bit more geared towards faculty, although there are some as well for students. And this is what I really want to get to, is to get you guys this URL and QR. So this is where you can get to the course, and that's where I'm going next, is to jump over and show you what this looks like. But the basic idea of this module now is there are a growing list or library of modules you can take. You do any 6 to earn the certificate, as long as at the same time you're documenting your learning through a learning journal. So you can earn a badge for each module. You can earn get 6 badges plus that learning journal, and you've got everything you need to qualify to earn the full certificate. And that learning journal is there to document kind of the steps you went through. We don't want to make it so easy that you could just do this entire thing by passing some quizzes. And so we are asking that you document some of the work that you do along the way, and which is what the learning journal is all about. All right, so let's go jump over and take a look at this. So this is what you should go see when you go to that Go URL. This is the publicly viewable homepage, basically, of this, which means you're viewing a Canvas course, but you might not have joined it yet. You might see a join course button up here, or I've added this self-enroll button. But this is the kind of master course through which you gain access to all of the modules. And all of the information about the certificate is on this course, including how to submit your learning journal and so forth. But this is also the access or entry point for all of the modules as they become available. And any one of these I can just go and enroll in. So I will jump into Understanding Generative AI, enroll in the course, and go to the course. You should be able to get started now. Most of them set up very similar, format like this, a module with about 12 pages, in a structure that asks that you move through them in a progression that makes sense so that you can pass a quiz and claim your badge. So that's kind of the structure of each module. The main Canvas page where we started, or the main Canvas course, if I go back a couple, I think I can get to it. Or maybe I have to close that tab, this one. So here's the list of modules that we have now. Generative AI literacy is probably the one that is most geared towards students, in that it asks that you generate a responsible AI use document at the end, something that you might turn over to your faculty along with the badge of completion that shows you've done this literacy course. So it's a good way for faculty to perhaps to help students check that box of yes, at least I understand a little bit more about how to use these tools. Understanding generative AI is kind of the foundational model for how do large language models work. This is a good place to start if you feel like you've got the literacy covered. It definitely gets increasingly more complex as you get into collaboration, and this designing interactions for consistency is about to open like today or tomorrow. I think we'll be able to launch this. This one starts to really get into how to use project folders effectively, how to use things like custom GPTs, and more reusable kind of AI. The engaging with multimedia is a great overview of how to create music, sounds, images, videos, all kinds of fun things. And then the three that are kind of coming soon are cognitive impacts of generative AI, really helping us kind of think about how to avoid cognitive loss, how to make sure we're not just offloading key parts of our learning to the AI. There will be another one that's maybe geared a little bit more towards students, how to use it to enhance learning, but I think it applies to both faculty and students who want to help their students think about how to use these tools more effectively to improve their learning and not kind of replace some of the work that they might be doing. And then the final one that we'll launch in June sometime here is the using and creating custom agents. And so if you have, you may find value in creating a custom GPT that does some repetitive tasks very well for you. And that's what that will cover. The future of these is we're continuing to build out new modules. And in the next phase, we're trying to work with campus experts who want to kind of share their voice and put out a module out there for the collective. And so we have modules on writing with AI coming, maybe responsible AI use, I think, is in the works. But looking for ways to continue to grow this library for the campus of anybody who has some expertise they'd like to share in this format. Most of the modules are probably geared to be about 90 minutes, but we're finding they take longer because the activities people get engaged in and they spend a little bit more time than we might have anticipated. But I think that's a good thing. And let's see, I'm going to jump back to my PowerPoint because I also want to show that I just started adding these to Canvas Catalog as well. So the first version, great for anybody with a NetID, right? If you've got a NetID, you can get into these and start them for free, doesn't cost anything. We want to start opening them up for outside audiences, and so they are on Canvas Catalog now, and this will take you to the first one we've put on Catalog, which is the Understanding Generative AI. For those of you who aren't aware, Canvas Catalog is kind of our paid access portal to continuing ed courses, so they're available to the public. You can easily purchase them. I think the modules are going to be priced at $15 per module or $90 for the certificate. So that is in the works. And the other reason we're doing that is it is hard to share these with audiences off campus who don't have a NetID. But going this route, we can do kind of a promo code that allows them free access into these to take a look, or we might share these with partners for free without having to charge them. But it gets us around that NetID entry point. I think that's the main gist of what I wanted to say. I did it all in 15 minutes instead of 30, but I'd like to open it up for questions. There's a number of you here. Please feel free to speak up or I will open the chat as well. Like I said, it was pretty much just a quick commercial of what we're offering. More to come. Hopefully, if you're interested in these, we really are looking for new authors to continue helping us build out a library. This is a very easy load. And if anyone's curious about kind of the authoring process, I'd be happy to talk about that as well, but that wasn't really my intention here.
Jim, I've got a question. As I'm looking at the section that mentions like the electives, how does the course track completion of those? Is that just through the journal, or how do we ascertain that the participants have completed them?
Yeah, that's a good question. We are encouraging people to do electives outside of our core modules across all of the campus and a lot of online folks as well. And mostly what we would want is a reflective journal entry about what they learned. If they were issued a badge or had any kind of proof of attendance, we'd ask them to add that to the journal as well. But I'm allowing them to just tie the electives and the content to the electives to their learning and think that's sufficient documentation for the electives.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions? If you're here, I assume you're either interested in doing this yourself, in which I encourage you just to jump in and try one. It's a pretty easy entry point, and the early ones are presented in both text and video, so they can be in. You can get the content in probably 30 minutes. If you engage with the activities, that's where a lot of the time is spent, but that's also where most of the learning is happening, right? But I would say just dive right in. Um, I should mention we're going to encourage faculty to be able to use any one of these modules that they like for students. So if you see value in just asking your students to complete one, it will present them with a badge like the one you see on screen here that they could give back to you to show that completion and what are we doing? I think 80% on the quiz gets you the badge. Um, this is pretty much how we're running the academic integrity modules on campus as well. If you haven't heard about those are also something you can point your students to, get them to do it online, and it will produce kind of proof of completion for you. Anyone else? Let's see, will there be synchronous components? Um, yes, mainly we do offer workshops, which you can use in place of the asynchronous modules. So you could always attend a workshop and call that one of the six. You can also use the Gen AI dialogues or any of the other AI events running around campus as an elective. So there's lots of opportunities to do synchronous work where we probably won't offer a lot of these base level modules in a workshop format very often, but maybe once a semester. Will there opportunities where CITL will bring in speakers to discuss leading research in AI as well as example by someone like that? Yeah, there is a lot of other stuff going on at CITL. So we have run for the past year, started with the summer of AI and then moved into the spring into AI that has now been rebranded as AI Horizons, which is how you found this event if you found that calendar entry. See if I can pull it back up. Maybe not. Did I lose it? Ah, there we go. And so this is our event series in which we do bring in all kinds of speakers. And we are also always open to anyone on campus who would like to speak to campus through this. There's all kinds of things that we do through the AI Horizons events, and those have been ongoing, um, including some off-campus experts at time. Yeah. I'm externally facing corporate development officer with AI platform. Does the UI prefer faculty staff to use OpenAI Codex? Um, yeah, that's a I Microsoft Copilot is probably the default campus tool because we've had a long-term agreement with Microsoft, so they kind of got that license set up quicker than anybody. And so we have a data protection agreement with Microsoft. Um, but we do have a number of tools that are endorsed, and those can be found at genai.illinois.edu and AI apps. So for those of you who haven't seen this yet, Copilot, we have a campus version of Illinois of ChatGPT you can purchase for $11 a month. And we have Google Gemini through our Google accounts included with our current Google licensing. And it does give you information on kind of what tools might be best for which different data uses here. Does that answer your question, Dan?
Yeah, yes, it does. Where is that? Where is that? Where is that? How do I get to that page? genai.illinois.edu. Okay, thank you.
Yep, in the chat now. Well, I don't want to take up any more time. If folks got what they needed, that was all I was hoping to present today. And there are other workshops on the calendar coming up soon, so join us for other events. Gonna stop the recording there.